action, there really are no signs yet of Republican voters recoiling against candidates embracing the big lie.
안녕하십니까. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 야간 근무를 계속 하다가 지금 주중에 2일 휴무가 있어요. 어제는 야간 퇴근해서 비몽사몽으로 있었고, 오늘은 온전히 하루를 쉬는 날입니다. 그래서 운동을 좀 해볼까 해요. 사실 어제도 영상을 안 찍긴 했지만 어제도 운동을 했습니다. 오늘은 살짝 날씨가 흐리네요. 요즘에 많이 더워지고 있죠. 미세먼지도 살짝씩 심해지고 있고. 일단은 운동을 하도록 하겠습니다. 여전히 똑같이 스트레칭과 팔굽혀펴기 위주로 하고 있고요. 턱걸이 안 한 지 너무 오래됐어요, 여러분. 진짜 큰일입니다. 운동도 해야 되고 공부도 해야 되고 24시간이 모자릅니다. 일단은 운동하도록 하겠습니다. 운동할 때 역시 CNN이죠.
Seats in a midterm election that Republicans need to win back the House. So the odds are pretty high they're going to have control of the House. And the question of what they do with that control around all the issues that will come up around certifying the 2024 presidential election, I think are more acute as a result of this episode than they were even before it.
Ron Brownstein, always great to get your analysis. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having
And
me.
still to come, long lines in Beijing as millions get tested for the coronavirus to prevent a Shanghai-like lockdown. How China is scrambling to implement its zero COVID policy. That's next.
Egypt is transitioning towards a sustainable, circular economy. Through the opening of the Gabal al-Asfar wastewater treatment plant, it is using treated water to irrigate agricultural land and is producing organic fertilizers. The plant has been designed to reduce waste and optimizes the use of water resources. It generates electricity and saves carbon emissions. Ensure that over 8 million people across the country live better, healthier lives.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
VitaSigns, in association with BDMS, Bangkok Dusit Medical Services, your trusted healthcare network.
Imagine needing a new kidney and having one made using your own cells. Or treating a bad burn with a 3D printed skin graft, unique to you. That might seem like a movie plot right now, but it's real. And it's taking place here, in an unassuming building in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But how exactly do you make an organ?
We start out by taking a very small sample of tissue from the patient, from the organ of interest. We then expand those cells outside the body, and we then create a three-dimensional scaffold that we can either make by hand or print to recreate the tissue for use in the patient's own cells. We then put it in this oven-like device that cooks it, if you will, before we put it back into the patient.
Welcome to BDMS. We care, prevent, treat, and rehabilitate you by our professional medical experts, equipped with the latest medical technology and up to date through knowledge exchange, and ensure you'll be in the hands of our doctors in no time. We are BDMS, your trusted healthcare network. BDMS, trust in our good hands.
Watchmakers have dealt with pandemic restrictions for years. Now they want to make up for that lost time. At the end of last year, Deloitte asked Swiss watch executives how they judged the outlook for 2022. More than 3/4 of them said they were feeling positive.
The industry has shown remarkable resilience in the last 2 years, going through COVID and coming out now more or less. I think watch and jewelry industry is thriving in a way, and this will certainly help.
Deloitte says travellers and in-store shoppers are the lifeblood of the luxury watch industry. So for executives in Geneva, their return is a moment to savour.
Something I guess we dreamed of, but didn't really truly believe it would happen until the last minute, because we've learned to adapt ourselves to, always changing environment.
See the remnants of some fresh strikes.
The news continues to get more grim.
This is one of the sites hit by Russian missiles.
Was this place targeted on purpose?
Red rockets flew through the sky.
The battle for the Donbass region has begun.
The soldiers concerned that this will be a secondary strike.
Putin might use a tactical nuclear weapon. Are you worried?
This is the story of one family's escape.
To see her safe is a relief.
In Kyiv,
Tallinn, Lviv.
This is CNN.
Authorities in Beijing are scrambling to detect new COVID cases and avert a major outbreak. Just hours ago, they announced the closure of some schools and major hospitals with almost no advance warning. Entertainment venues are closing as well. More neighborhoods are now considered high risk and are being sealed. While it's not the lockdown Shanghai has been facing, Beijing residents fear they're not far behind. CNN's David Culver has our report.
The calm before the storm. Beijing residents are stocking up, bracing themselves for a potential onslaught of COVID cases. Beijing officials calling the matter urgent and grim, ordering nearly 20 million people to get tested 3 times this week alone. CNN is in the capital city.
And it doesn't seem to affect daily life. These office workers take a quick test at lunchtime and back to work. They seem calm and prepared.
But Beijing's preparation is in part due to Shanghai officials' disastrous response to an outbreak there. The horror stories from the financial hub, a shock to many across China. Officials in the capital determined to avoid the embarrassment of botching President Xi Jinping's zero COVID strategy, especially in the city where he lives.
You are seeing, at least on the surface, a more orderly, kind of organized kind of effort, and even overstocking supermarkets, which are still open.
Open for now. Residents know how quickly it can all change. Some Beijing communities already in lockdown, people sealed in. A taste of what life is like for most in Shanghai. Nearly 1 month of hard lockdown, and many Shanghai residents are at a breaking point. Feelings of being caged in, amplified when the city recently began installing fences like these to keep people from leaving their apartment buildings. And on the streets, more and more barricades going up. Medical resources stretched, these Shanghai hospital workers refusing to help a desperate mother. CNN also living through the Shanghai lockdown. Outside my door, only a paper seal. A COVID guard sits on watch in my compound. Much like the rest of this city, exhausted by the extreme containment efforts. Here, the white hazmat suit is the new uniform of authority, the enforcers, so much so that this compound even using it as a scarecrow to keep people in check. Since 2020, Chinese authorities have relentlessly turned to harsh lockdowns in hopes of containing COVID. Right now, people in more than 24 cities across China are living in full or partial lockdowns. Some border cities have been in months-long lockdowns, with outsiders barely paying attention. In Shanghai, demand for government quarantine space is rising with the case count. Exhibition centers, gyms, classrooms, entire office buildings, all taken over to isolate positive cases and close contacts. And those trapped in their homes, banging pots to vent their anger. One woman heard screaming, "Give me back my freedom." David Culver, CNN, Shanghai.
Extraordinary situation there. Well, gas and oil producing areas of the US are turning to another source of energy to keep the lights on. Just ahead, why wind energy is blowing up across America's heartland.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Engine continues our impetus and momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top newsmakers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
This theatre will be filled with people and art and debate and energy. And so now we have to rely on the tools.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion, maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Alan Paul, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
On Mission Ahead, a softer approach to robotics. Then, Mother's Milk, created in a lab, and smart solutions for sleep disorders.
Sleep is a goldmine for understanding our health.
Meet the doctors and inventors that are putting cutting-edge technology to new uses. They're on a mission to combat some of the world's biggest problems.
This really is the holy grail that like every scientist in this space has been dreaming about.
Mission Ahead, this weekend on CNN in association with Fujifilm.
Welcome back, everyone. The Taliban may have access to an enormous trove of American weapons now that US troops are out of Afghanistan. A new report says US forces left behind $7 billion worth of military equipment after their pullout last year. That includes 40,000 military vehicles, 300,000 pieces of individual weapons, and 78 aircraft. But the report by the US Defense Department says the aircraft have been rendered inoperable. It also says much of the leftover equipment needs specialized maintenance by US military contractors. Well, in parts of the US communities devoted to producing oil and gas, a fueling and explosion in another energy source, wind. Analysts say the middle of the country is an ideal location for wind energy to flourish. And as CNN chief climate correspondent Bill Weir reports, the industry has some of the fastest job growth in America.
Earlier this month, and for the first time ever, wind produced more American electricity than coal or nuclear, and was second only to natural gas. That's right, wind. And climate-wary carbon cutters on the coasts have the red states in the heartland to thank, especially Texas.
Texas is consistently #1 in installed capacity, both in wind and like more recently in solar as well. Yeah.
Everything's big in Texas.
Everything's big in Texas, yeah.
Including green energy. A Danish company called Ørsted, which used to drill for oil in the North Sea, now has 1,000 turbines from Texas to the Dakotas, the new American wind belt. This is not easy. Just one reason wind technicians are among the nation's fastest growing jobs.
So do you see guys go back and forth between the oil and gas industry into wind?
You know, a lot of times, you know, we'll see them come into the wind industry and typically, you know, not leave. So it's a lot more of a stable job, you know, and we're here for the long haul, right?
The next wave of new jobs will come offshore after the Biden administration smashed records with multi-billion-dollar lease sales along the Atlantic coast.
They can be placed way out in the ocean. And, you know, and by the way, I made it clear to my friends up in Nantucket and that area, I don't want to hear any more about, you know, like looking at them. They're pretty.
The late Senator Ted Kennedy famously killed an offshore wind farm in Chesapeake Bay because he didn't like the way it ruined the view. But they love the view in these parts of rural Texas because it means money. As for the other criticisms, yes, turbines kill maybe 800,000 to 1 million birds a year, but for perspective, house cats kill 2.4 billion. And no, there is absolutely no science that says turbines cause cancer. This sector is growing so rapidly, officials from Ørsted tell me their biggest challenge may be running up against limitations of the grid. There is no smart grid in North America. The country is divided into West and East and Texas, which is its own power grid, which brings up a whole nother host of challenges and possibilities. A smart grid, part of Joe Biden's major infrastructure bill, and he would like to continue that with the Build Back Better bill, now stalled in Congress. Bill Weir, CNN, Vernon, Texas.
Great story there. Well, the latest SpaceX mission is off to a successful start after docking with the International Space Station a few hours ago. The Crew 4 team was greeted by Crew 3, already aboard the station and set to return to Earth next week. Among the new tenants is NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins, the first black woman to join the space station crew, and her team will spend the next few months doing research and experiments to improve life on Earth and prepare for further space exploration. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rosemary Church. More of our breaking news coverage live from Ukraine right after this short break.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
Getting perspective on this region from this region, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson tonight on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here? How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here? Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America?
All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
I'm Malene Oberheiser and I am a lead solutions engineer at OneTrust ESG. What's really about leaders coming together at events like this is that you can really have that conversation amongst peers. You can learn from each other's expertise. And at the end of the day, sustainability, to me at least, shouldn't be a competition between companies. It is about collaborating. It is about working together to be more sustainable, to reduce our carbon footprint, to achieve the targets that we need to achieve as a society. And therefore, having events like this, having this exchange, having discussions, and learning most of all is very, very valuable. It's great to be back face to face after COVID as well and be able to look each other in the eye and have those important conversations.
This is CNN 10. My name is Carl Dukes. I'll be your explainer-in-chief.
Relevant stories, complex issues explained, all in 10 minutes. CNN 10, a virtual learning resource you can use at home. Stream at cnn.com/CNN10.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Tonight on CNN.
I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul. This is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and a very warm welcome to our viewers joining us in the United States and right around the world. I'm Isa Suarez live in Ukraine, where Vladimir Putin is warning against Western intervention in his unprovoked war, while the US says it has credible evidence of Russia's barbaric tactics on the battlefield.
And I'm Rosemary Church at CNN World Headquarters in Atlanta. I'll have all our other top stories, including millions being tested in Beijing as China doubles down on its zero COVID policy.
Welcome to the show, everyone. The battle for control of eastern Ukraine is heating up. The Ukrainian military says Russian forces are now, quote, exerting intense fire on multiple fronts with a focus on making a breakthrough in the Izium area. Another region facing growing attacks is Luhansk. This video is from the aftermath of a strike on a hospital in Severodonetsk, said to be one of the region's only functioning hospitals. One woman is reported dead. Officials say the hospital is still operating, despite, of course, suffering that significant damage, as you can see there. Well, Severodonetsk is among the hardest hit towns as Russia intensifies its offensive in the east. Meantime, Russian President Vladimir Putin is making a stark as well as direct threat about foreign interference in Ukraine. Have a listen.
If someone intends to intervene in what is happening from the outside and creates unacceptable strategic threats for us, then they should know that our response to oncoming strikes will be swift, lightning fast. We have all the tools for this, ones that no one can brag about. And we won't brag. We will use them if needed.
Now, his threat came shortly after 3 explosions inside Russian regions bordering Ukraine. This is an ammunition depot on fire in Belgorod. Ukraine has not said whether they are responsible for the blasts, but an aide to Ukraine's president described them as, quote, karma. And those aren't the only explosions to rock territory under Russian control. This is is in the Russian-occupied city of Kherson in southern Ukraine. Russian state-run media report the blast was caused by 3 missiles fired by Ukrainian forces. We haven't had any confirmation of that from Ukraine. It reportedly happened near a TV broadcaster, allegedly causing Russian channels to go dark in the city. Joining me now from London, CNN's Nada Bashir. And Nada, very good morning to you. Clearly another veiled threat, as we heard there from President Putin. That, of course, shouldn't be overlooked. But how much has the US position, that is, that the Ukrainians winning, that they want Russia to be weakened, rattling Putin here, Nada?
Well, look, Ita, we are hearing Putin stepping up that rhetoric. They're alluding perhaps to the use of tactical nuclear weapons. We've heard from the Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby describing these remarks from President Putin as irresponsible rhetoric. But we have to note that this isn't the first time President Putin has suggested that Russia might resort to using such weapons. And in fact, earlier this month, we heard from the Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer, who had a one-on-one meeting with President Putin, and coming away from that meeting, he said that he wasn't sure if Putin, or whether or not he would resort to using such weapons if he found himself to be cornered. But he also noted that he felt Putin was aware that he could use the threat of these weapons, of tactical nuclear weapons, against the international community. Now, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has previously said that that Russia would only resort to such weapons if the existence of the state was at stake. But this has obviously caused some concern, and we are seeing NATO allies stepping up their response to these remarks. Just here in the UK yesterday, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss warning allies that they could be in this fight with Russia for the long haul, urging allies to step up their support for Ukraine, particularly on the military front. Take a listen.
The war in Ukraine is our war. It's everyone's war, because Ukraine's victory is a strategic imperative for all of us. Heavy weapons, tanks, aeroplanes, digging deep in our inventories, ramping up production. We need to do all of this.
Now, this is particularly significant with a focus as well on the supply of warplanes to Ukraine. There has long been a call from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. We've seen just in the last few days the UK, Canada stepping up their military support for Ukraine. And on Tuesday, in a major policy U-turn, Germany now pledging anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine. But as you mentioned, there are still diplomatic efforts ongoing, and we are continuing to see the heavy bombardment of Ukraine. So that call for further support will certainly be intensified over the coming days. We heard from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, speaking to CNN. He said that this will only end when the Russian state decides to do so.
Yeah, and he'll be meeting, of course, today with President Zelensky in Kyiv. Thank you very much, Nada Bashir, for us in London. Thank you, Nada. Appreciate it. Meanwhile, the United States says it has credible information that Russian soldiers executed Ukrainians who were trying to surrender. According to the US, it happened in Donetsk, in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. At the United Nations on Wednesday, the US Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice said the US also has credible reports of civilians killed execution-style torture and sexual violence against women and girls. Have a listen.
Let us be clear, those who unleashed, perpetrated, and ordered these crimes must be held to account, and the evidence of this criminality is mounting daily. Our simple message to Russia's military and political leadership and to the rank and file is this: the world is watching, and you will be held accountable.
Meanwhile, intense Russian attacks in eastern Ukraine have left some of the most vulnerable desperate as well as trapped, trying to hold on to any semblance really of normal life they can. But with shells constantly raining down, that is next to impossible. And just getting the minimum necessities of life, of course, is a struggle in itself, as our Sam Kiley found out.
Severodonetsk, on the front line with Russia. It's an artillery front line.
Basement, let's get into the basement.
Local police are delivering aid to civilians unable to leave. There's no time to wait out the bombardment. There's no likely end to the shelling either. Supplies need delivering and fast. She tells me there are 3 people next door, including a granny of 92. Upstairs, a bedridden woman. She says that normally they stay in their flat and only use the basement when it's bad. Thank you for not forgetting us, she adds.
The urgency of these sorts of deliveries cannot be exaggerated. Just in this block, there's mostly old people. One gentleman's dying of cancer in front of his wife. She's saying she's living in a double hell since we've been here. There've been, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 impacts very, very close. And almost every tree, every corner, every bit of this local neighborhood has got the signs of recent impacts. The Russians are just a kilometer, maybe 3 away.
Russian guns are so close you can hear the whole arc of their shells. From Kyiv to Mariupol, from Kharkiv to here, this is the Russian way of war. Pound civilians, flatten cities, and maybe occupy the ashes. Alexander says, we're in danger now, they're shelling us, so it could come at any moment and shrapnel could hurt us. We try to hide there, in the bomb shelter. Two months of war has driven these people underground, and there's no end in sight. The fear, Alexander confesses, he tries to keep inside, but it creeps out.
There's one more delivery that the police have got to make, but every time we try to get out the front door of this building, there's another impact. There's another one now. They're saying that the hospital, which is nearby, is under heavy shelling. We were planning to go there. We can't get through, nor indeed at the moment can we even get out of this bunker.
The hospital was hit. Images of the damage done that morning, posted online by the local administration. Officials said that one civilian was killed, others injured, and several floors were badly damaged. The humanitarian effort goes on. This woman asks only for the basics of existence: water and candles for light.
Good job. You do this every day?
Yes.
Bogdan tells me that most people left here now have nowhere else to go. They've lived here all their lives and don't want to abandon their homes.
Do you think the Russians are going to take Severodonetsk?
Never, he says. We will stand our ground to the last man. No one will leave here. That may be a dangerous claim. It's likely that Ukrainians will destroy this bridge to hold up the invasion. And anyone still here would then be trapped in Russian hands. Sam Kiley, CNN, Severodonetsk.
Powerful report there from Sam Kiley and team. Well, according to the UN, more than 5 million Ukrainians have been able to flee the violence. Some 400,000 have gone to neighbouring Moldova. That's where we find Conor O'Loughlin of Catholic Relief Services. Conor, very good morning to you. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us. Give us a sense of what you and your teams have been seeing on the ground.
Good morning, and you mentioned there the numbers that have come into Moldova, and we're still seeing 100,000 refugees in Moldova here at the moment. Many have passed through onto the European Union, but many have stayed here hoping to be able to return to Ukraine as soon as they can. But we know the situation hasn't allowed that yet. And what we see at the moment is that Ukrainian families have to make decisions, and those are difficult decisions: where to live, how to get work, where to send their children to school. We're 2 months into this crisis now, and they're also separated from their spouses, and it is exhausting and stressful, particularly for mothers and children, as they try to make decisions for themselves. What will they do in the future?
Conor, those still making their way to Moldova, those you've been speaking to, give us a sense of the stories that you've been hearing.
Well, we've heard many, many stories. I think people that have come into Moldova recently, or even since the start of the crisis, relay the trauma that they have experienced, and particularly that, making decisions to leave their homesteads And what we're seeing really, what is so unique about this crisis is the separation of families. You know, it is unprecedented.
Yeah.
We are supporting many, many families here, but it is women and children, and it is elderly as well. And that feature of separated families, as you can imagine, is hugely distressful for those refugees that are here. And dealing with that trauma, you really, really see it, the distress of people. And for Catholic Relief Services here, a big part of our response is also providing psychological care, that counselling for people that have experienced that first-hand trauma in a conflict situation, and that is incredibly difficult to witness, but it's also a really important part of this response as well from a humanitarian perspective.
Yeah, so much distress on top of everything, of course, like you said, kind of they've gone through. I have been speaking to Ukrainians here in Lviv who have moved back, who've said, you know, I don't want to be away from my husband, I want to be I want to be home. They just somehow haven't been able, like you said, to find schools, find housing. Are you hearing the same? Are you hearing stories of people wanting to come back?
Absolutely. We hear the same stories here. We have witnessed some families return across the border from Moldova to Ukraine. And that is back to the point on decisions that people need to make now and are forced to make to determine, you know, their long-term futures also. I happened to be in Lviv myself last week, and